Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Jane Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special returning guest, Tatiana Obey. Tatiana, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. It's awesome. We talked about you quite a bit over the last, half a season. I would say we had quite a few people read Sistah Samurai and really enjoy it. It's been a if you go through with certain episodes, it's been quite the hot topic. So me and Herman's two episodes, I believe, were two of the bigger ones, Herman Stewart and Angle. So if nobody's seen Tatiana and Herman's episode on the greatest podcast in the multiverse, please check that out. It was super cool conversation between you two, and I just enjoyed, me. I like the director's cut or the author's cut of seeing how people, came up with their stories and stuff like that. So it's just so cool to have you back and to just get to see the success of the novella. And I mean, what a gorgeous cover. It was one of my favorites for sure. That he's done within the last several years. It was super cool. But what a great story overall. So congrats on all the success. It's been awesome.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. I mean, you had you had some fingers in that cover.
Very little, very little. I thought it was cool as soon as Felix put it up, and I was like, "What is this?" And when I saw your name, I was like, "Oh my god!" And I remember I was like, I kind of like peeked at it, and then I actually waited because I was in the middle of something. So then I saved it for later when I was just like ready, and I remember just like I had saved the image, and then when I saw it, it just blew my mind. So it just goes back to when we first had our first interview where you were talking about this idea, and I just thought it was so cool. If you go back, which I did and Herman did, and we went back and kind of saw what your process were, and how you were thinking. And I just have to say, like, when you said, and I remember so specifically when you said, like, you knew exactly what you wanted to do in your head with the vibe and everything. I mean, I just was like, it blew my mind, just the cover alone. Because I was like, this was totally like, I felt it, and I
Yeah.
felt like it was such a great representation of like what we were trying to do. Then after I read the book, it just blew me out of the water because I was just like, I don't know, it's interesting when there's something particular I'm trying to do in my novella, and I felt like you did that with yours, like you really wanted it to be a certain way. And I don't know, I felt like cover, blurb, and the book itself just like was a home run. I felt like everything that you had said originally you wanted to do, when we talked, I felt like you did and just did really well. So it was like super cool to see all of that. So
Yeah, to like because I believe we recorded that interview probably the December 2022. So it's
I believe so. Yep.
after the second book came out. And I remember in that interview where it was the first time I had ever publicly talked about Sister Samurai, like had talked about like the idea of it. But in that interview, we were also like kind of fangirling over some of Feliz Ortiz's book covers.
Yep.
And it was after that interview, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should go email him.
That's so funny.
I was like, maybe I should go email him. And I emailed him, like just little like well, just I thought it would be like a random shot in the universe.
Yeah.
And he got back to me. And yeah, it was history after that. But like the idea started here.
That's so funny. I I'm not surprised because as everybody who's watched this podcast will know, like Felix is one of my top three favorites, of all time, particularly with fantasy. I mean, like Clayton Snyder with Blackthorn. I mean, obviously Felix can do anything he wants with sci-fi or dystopian or whatever. But yeah, I just thought that was just such a cool cover. It was just
Yeah.
awesome.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
super cool.
And Felix, he has such a like an ability to do different styles. And
Yeah, he's a chameleon for sure.
yes, he is. And I was looking for that samurai style, like never die and things. And I was just like,
Yep.
but I remember I emailed him and I was like, my inspiration is an homage to Afro Samurai. And when he was immediately like, yes, like I know that it's one of my favorites. I was like, this is it.
I it's funny because that had actually popped up for me for some, I don't know, for some odd reason, like that week actually. That and like Samurai Jack had both popped up for me again a lot on TikTok for some reason.
Yeah.
So it was so funny, like I don't know, it was like almost serendipitous. So it was kind of funny that then I saw that the cover later in the week for Sistah Samurai, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like yeah, I definitely felt because we had talked too, a lot about a lot of anime and stuff like that, that I've actually had people come to me and say that, oh, I watched Tatiana's recommendations from the episode, and I'm like, yeah, there's some good ones in there. So I've watched a couple after that too, just to kind of get those kind of feels, because samurai are just cool, obviously. So yeah, but Afro Samurai was really awesome. I feel like one of my friends, that was like one of like their favorites growing up, so I always went to their house, and that was just like one that we were always watching. So yeah, I just thought it was super super cool to see that. But yeah, I feel like you knocked it out of the water for it. It was really really neat. I love the color scheme. If you guys don't know, go look up Sistah Samurai, right? Or just go in the description now and you'll see Felix's work, and you'll just be like, okay, that is really cool. So go check out the book. It was awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to dive in here just a little bit and pick your brain. I'm gonna try to do the no spoiler thing. At one point we'll have to do a spoiler one for sure, but for today we kind of introduce people, to, maybe they didn't see episode 1. I do want people to kind of go back to. That was a great episode. We talked about your duology, which I was excited. Some people told me that they had watched that episode, and now, they bought your books and stuff, and we're reading them. So I think that's awesome. But what else have you been up to, since the last time we interviewed about a year ago? Obviously, your duology came out. So just want to kind of get a little snapshot at what you've been working on so far.
Sure. So I believe after the interview, I wrote Sistah Samurai, finished it by March, but I didn't publish it until November. So I was kind of sitting on it finished for quite a bit. But getting the cover art and things like
Oh
that
yeah.
in line and things. And I also wanted to make sure I had a sizable, at least a month pre-order campaign.
Yep.
So, those kind of important things to put in place. I was also part of the Advent of Winter, which was a really fun project that Dominish did. So I have a short story, and that was my first anthology. So I was very grateful to have that opportunity. And then, and now I'm currently working on another novel, but we'll see how that goes.
That's awesome. I totally forgot you did the anthology. I have to go back to that too. I know that was in my notes somewhere and it just got lost in since then. But that's really awesome. Isn't it funny though? I just want to point out, like I had a couple indie authors on recently, and they were just like, oh, I don't have much going on, and they're like, oh, like 2 novels, and novella, an anthology. I'm like that's a lot going on for anybody. So
Yeah.
I think you and I had said that at one point too. About I was teasing you at one point on Instagram. You're like, oh, I just have the novella, and I was like, just the novella. Like now doing it myself, I'm like, oh my god, she had a novella. Like I just feel like there's so much work even for an anthology, right? But yeah, so I applaud you for getting that much done. I feel behind the curve for trying to push my novella forward. So
And a lot of when you have a novella, I feel as if, a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a novella. It's not a novel. So I shouldn't put as much energy towards
yeah,
it.
yeah,
I highly disagree. Like if you want the novella to be successful, put as much energy and resources and marketing to your novella as you would a regular novel.
yeah,
Like it requires the same amount of energy to like make sure it's visible, make sure people are seeing it. So it does require a lot of a lot of energy.
yeah.
So I'm definitely tired by the end of last year.
I think people think it's like 1/3 of a book, right? So you're gonna be 1/3 tired. It's like it's actually not true. So I saw Sister Samurai everywhere. I mean, it was everywhere, which was so cool. I tried sharing it like wherever I could find, but it was so cool to see it on Instagram, to see it on Twitter, to go to Threads, TikTok. I mean, feel like I know a lot of people. Obviously, there's too many people to know, but it was just so cool, to just to see the domino effect.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of friends with the community. I was like, oh, I interviewed her. It was awesome, and I was like, I can't wait for this book. And it was just so cool that I actually made new author friends or reviewer friends or, our podcast friends just because they shared, your novella. And yeah, it was just so cool, and it was just, I'm a social studies teacher. So to see that cultural diffusion firsthand was just so cool. And to know you, and had interviewed you and stuff, bought your books, read them and stuff. I just felt like it's just cooler that way.
Yeah.
I always feel like with Will Ferrell from Elf, with Santa, like I know them, like that kind of thing. So it just made it so much cooler. So, but it was so cool just to see it just absolutely explode. So it was really neat. I've had a lot of conversations with people about, like I said, Herman and I have talked, about Sistah Samurai. I've had like random people, that I've talked to, that have approached me about it on Instagram, just all sorts of things. So it was super, super cool to see that. But I agree with you. I think that if you had not, I think your first thing was just writing such a great novella. And you really, like I said, you got the vibe right. Everything was just perfect with it. But I think after that, just with whatever you did, I felt like it worked really well, at least from my perspective, because you just flooded everything everywhere and everybody was sharing it like crazy. So that was super cool. It was so
Yeah.
cool to have random conversations with people about it too. Like just message me. Like it was really neat.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I'm still very surprised about like the response because I think at that time, Twitter had transitioned
It
over to
did. Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
even my Twitter timeline, I was seeing no book talk at all. So I was like, oh, where did everyone go? Did everyone leave?
Yep.
So I premiered the cover with um an Instagram book club, and they're
Oh, cool.
primarily read BIPOC authors. So I
Oh, cool.
premiered the book with the cover with them, and they were very excited about it. And then I was like, okay, well, let me just post it everywhere so people know about it. And I posted it
Yeah.
on Twitter, and it was just like, whoa, wait, what's happening? What's going on? People are still here. I was very surprised myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's what I've been trying to like get people to send me their book trailers or stuff like that. Like obviously there's like copyright stuff for certain things, so it's hard for me to share. I tried to on social media have people email or put stuff in our podcast group or whatever, but I've had book trailer success for some people, or even if it's like 30 or 40 and then a couple of reviewers or somebody. So it was nice to kind of branch stuff out there. So I actually do remember that now. That was something that I did watch that was really cool. So I thought that was really neat. I think book cover reveals are just, I love them because was an illustrator at heart, right? I just absolutely love covers. So I geeked out about that. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, that's super awesome. Yeah. I think it's important though, right? To get that out there. And it was, I felt like that now you say I do feel like I remember that time. I think that's why it was so shocking to me because I thought everybody left, but everybody came out to share your cover and then the blurb.
Oh, so was
So
it just me?
yeah, for me at least. And I was like, oh, everybody's still here. And it kind of reminded me of oh my God, which book? Way of Kings, right? Where they talk about like, where Brandon's like talking about the flowers where they like go into themselves. And all of a sudden, when the rain or the sun's out, they come back out. That's how I felt. I was like, oh my God, everybody's out, you know, getting Sistah Samurai out there. So I thought that was really cool. I've seen that a couple times. Yours was one, and there was like four other books that were kind of everywhere on there. So I was like, okay, cool. My peeps are still here. So, really got to hit that algorithm, I guess, now. But it was really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then it's kind of just been like a domino effect like since then. Like I see like people kind of like especially by word of mouth, like people are talking about it. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's still doing well.
Yeah. You were just in a book. Well, yeah, that was in a, it was what do you call it? Like just like a indie fantasy book club thing I'm in on Facebook. I mean, I'm talking like 14, 15,000 people at least, and somebody had put it in. I'll try and find it. But somebody posted it the other day that like this was like an absolutely fabulous read. And I was like, yeah, it was.
Oh, you know about
um,
that.
yeah, it was super cool. I've seen three of them within like the last 6 months. I'm in a lot of them, right? But I'll have to try and find the post to send it to you. I should have tagged you now that I think about it. Totally forgot. But yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, just to see it organically, maybe not randomly is a good word to say, but organically,
Yeah.
it's pretty neat. So yeah, I always love that for anybody that's been on here where, I see something. John Palladino was a big one after I had him on for our episode, and it was like all of a sudden he was everywhere after that, and then especially with book two and stuff. So it's always cool to see people like that organically. I was like, I know her. It was really neat. Yeah, it was awesome. So I know we were talking a little bit so far, because you've been on, but just for our audience, maybe this is the first time, that they, have seen you. Or, have been on this podcast. Maybe it's their first time watching. But what genres do you currently write in and why?
Okay. So my duology, which is consists of Bones to the Wind and Dragon Your Bones, is primarily sword and sorcery, although the second book is a little bit more political intrigue in there. Um, and Sistah Samurai is action fantasy. And, I think I gravitate towards these genres because I love both action and character-driven stories. I'm not a big romance person. You're not going to find romance as the main premise, even though there might be subplots, because I like writing characters, and characters sometimes fall in love, and I can't really stop them
Wish you could sometimes.
unless I kill them off.
Yeah.
But I also, when I think of genres in particular, like epic or high fantasy, they tend to be more plot driven, and obviously their exceptions, but I do feel like they tend to be more plot driven. But I'm more about like the characters and what they're experiencing and what their goals and what their motivations are. But I would love to eventually like have a career like Rob J. Hayes, where he kind of just genre hops.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, I have book ideas for like science fantasy and progression fantasy and like grim dark anti-colonial fantasy. But
Oh, that's cool.
all the things that like the books will pretty much have in common is character, action, and melanin. All those three. That's
That's
what I'll.
awesome. That's awesome. Um, oh, well, I was gonna say, I think that makes total sense though. When you're talking about like kind of like a sword and sorcery fantasy, where or being character driven. Because I mean, like I've bought and read so many Conan books,
Yeah.
and it's like the only thing that changes is the story. But it's always like if I want like a read where I can go to, and he's going through different things at different times. But it's just, yeah, like I go there, like Hyperborea is cool and all right, but like I go there for the Conan,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
he handles situations and and things like and how he grows. And so I was just talking with another author about that. So I totally feel you there. I feel like that's where I like a lot of like Eric Wag has two really good like Conan-ish books coming that are out. I'm reading book one right now. But yeah, like his character is very similar, but going through a lot of different things, and it's the character that I'm really enjoying. So I think that makes
Yeah.
total sense for why you like to write those kind of stories.
And I love like, well, I mean, I don't want to say I love Conan the Barbarian because there are some racist depictions in it, but like I do enjoy the like swashbuckling heroes,
Yep.
like facing off against like monsters and demons. Like this is not necessarily saving the world, but kind of just, we're gonna go slay something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's the premise of like my whole duology. Like there's one particular character in it that the novel that I'm currently working on is set in the same universe, but it has that same recurring character. So readers will be able to follow that character, very similar to Conan the Barbarian. So it'll be kind of like serial adventures in a way.
yeah, yeah. What was like Sinbad? Like was like another one. Like there was such a great. The '90s one on Sci-Fi was horrible. But there I had read one depiction where it was like it made more. It was like, oh, it was a graphic novel, and it was from like the early 2000s. But like I was like studying history, and it was just so cool to see somebody take that story and make it more historically accurate, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
and have interactions with different groups of people. And it was just so cool.
I'm
And
very curious about this book now.
yeah, I have to find it. I actually was just looking for it with my parents. Um, but it was just so neat. And I think that I only had the one like graphic novel, but it was really good. And I always liked that. And I think that's why like, well, like stories like yours I'm like really like drawn to with like the characters. But yeah, I like having the same character I can come back to. Like Kelly McCullough has R.L. Kingslayer, and like the main character, it's not your typical like European fantasy. I just get so bored with that. No offense to anybody, but like I want to see new worlds. I want to see new people's interact, and he just did such a good job with that. And I like fantasy in a different setting, and I always like to think like what if. So it was
Yeah.
just so cool to see somebody do something different with a group of characters and to meet a lot of different groups of people.
Well,
And
that's what I'm trying to do.
it was really cool. Yeah, it was really cool. That's where my friend the other day was like, oh, I have to buy both of Tatiana's like duology books now. I was like, Yep, and he read the blurb, but I don't think he read both blurbs I sent him, but he didn't look at the covers. So then I get this text from him later and I just say, no. I was like, what's your problem? He goes, those are so cool. I was like, I know, because it's our kind of art too, for fantasy art. So yeah, but I just think it's so cool, that you're doing that, with different stories. And yeah, it's just I like character driven stories. That's just my thing. So it's probably why I like Sistah Samurai so much. So well, thank you for answering that question. If anybody hasn't been with us so far, you can just check out, our description. All of Tatiana's books and social links will be there, so you can check out these amazing books that we're, discussing, and some of my favorite covers that have been out recently. This is going to be my favorite question I've asked so far this year. No offense to anybody. So for our third question, what is your Sistah Samurai novella about, and how did you come up with this idea?
So Sister Samurai is about a Black woman samurai. She's the last of her clan, and she's going into the village, running her errand. She's hitting up her favorite ramen spots and just trying to mind her business and get back home. But unfortunately, there's all these warlords and demons that are trying to stop her and get in her way. And in regards to like how did I come up with this idea, I do feel like it was kind of a bunch of different inspirations coming together at once. The first seed, I had this just flash of this Black lady samurai, and I'm like, what's going on with her? She looks very interesting. And when I finally kind of sat down to start writing it, the idea began as a short story and it turned into a novella. But when I was trying to figure out what this thing was, Afro Samurai immediately popped into my head. And it's an anime I grew up on. I'm a big anime nerd. And it was a very like important piece of media in regards to like blurred culture, Black nerd culture, because it's an anime that kind of presented an unapologetically Black main
Yeah,
character.
yeah, yeah.
So I enjoyed watching that, but there's not a lot of Black female representation in that show. It kind of felt like, oh, yay, the guy nerd, they got something. What about us? Like we
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
get anything. So I felt that this was my opportunity to kind of rectify that representation. Um, and then also I try to think of like what are those stories that I'm uniquely positioned to deliver, that no one else might be able to. And I studied Japanese in university. I studied abroad in Japan. I lived in Asia. I've done multiple martial arts. At this point, I knew that I could write good action scenes. Just a celebration and a celebration for us. And in many ways, it's in conversation with Afro Samurai, but it's kind of also a connection of Afro Samurai, Samurai Champloo, like the Boondocks, just all of those fun
Yeah.
animes growing up. Yeah.
I forgot about the Boondocks. That was another really good one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have to say, like it, like when we first talked, and you said like you had this idea, about this Afro samurai woman, and I was just like, that is so cool. I have to see this, and I think that I hadn't quite seen too much when you were kind of doing the before with Felix. So I knew I'd seen some updates, and then I don't know, like stuff happened for me, and that was why it was just so cool when I saw the cover reveal that you were doing, and I was just like, oh my god, that's so cool. It was so much cooler than I thought in my head. So yeah, it just gave me so many cool ideas for different characters. I actually end up having like several different characters that I've been writing recently that came from that idea. So just yeah, just awesome, female, just kicking, booty everywhere and just doing their thing, just like unique characters. So I was like, that's really, really cool. So that's why I like really just interesting ideas, because it always gets me, my writer brain just goes from there. So that's why I do these interviews. I feel like I just get so many more voices in my head from different perspectives that tell different stories that people can learn different things from. So maybe it's the social studies teacher in me, but God, do I just love a samurai.
I know, I know. And it is kind of surprising to me that like I feel like this fusion genre hasn't really been touched in 20
Yeah,
years, like since then.
yeah.
And it's just it's I do feel emotional when people are like, I read this book and now I'm going to read Samurai Champloo. Now I'm going to read Afro
Yeah.
Samurai. Introduce them to that. And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah. No, it's super cool. Now I keep having this thought in my head. I'm like the first person that does, like an anime for it in particular. I'm like, I'm gonna be there, because it's left a, like Blue Eyed Samurai was great. But I really want this as an anime, and I want to see, how the character will interact with the world and the different choices that'll be made and just the story. I agree with you. I was thinking that the other day. I was like, oh, there's like this is like an untapped market here. So I would love to see, what your world will develop into. So you never know.
Me too.
I,
Anyone, anime production
yeah,
studios. Oh
I'm
man.
like, I really. If anybody knows anybody, just send them to our description. Tatiana's links will all be there. Yeah, I just was thinking, like, God, this would just be so cool. Yeah, so because I was watching a little bit of Samurai Jack clips the other day. TikTok must have heard me talking about Samurai or something in prep for the interview. But yeah, I was just like, oh, it's always one of those genres that I just love. So to see you expand the genre was just really, really cool. And in such a way too, it was just really neat to get a different character that I really enjoyed in the genre, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that we always pass by, like as authors, like you think like, oh, I only sold this many copies, or people always tell me I didn't print that much last year, and I'm like, you just created a character for so many people permanently in the genre, and that's pretty freaking cool in my opinion. So kudos there. I think that a lot of times we forget about those kind of things, that we do for people. So I just wanted to point that out. Somebody else had mentioned that to me. So I think that's pretty cool, that you're able to pave a different way, into the genre that you talked about so much and love, and we talked about in our last interview. So I think that that's really, really neat personally. So that's all any of us are really trying to do, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So it was really cool.
that means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. It was just so cool. That's where me and Herman were like, we need more. So keep going. We'll pay whatever price you need for the novellas. So, but everybody go out and buy it. I'm going to say the same thing I always say about Clayton Snyder and his Cold West. Like, go out, buy both of these books so that way I can get a second one, because I'm very selfish and I need to see where the characters are going and what's going on. I wish I had enough money to be like an actual patron from the Renaissance, because then I wouldn't have any problem. I could just be like, here you go, Tatiana, like, and then we could talk about like who's going to direct, and produce, and and do the the art and stuff for your anime. That would just be really cool. So if I win the lottery, that's what we're doing. I want you to
All
know.
right. All right.
Awesome.
He said
all
it
i
here.
need all I need is some popcorn for the first showing. So um yeah, I loved it though. I read it, it was amazing. It was one of the only two like novellas that I was able to sit in one sitting for. I just like hit my son at that spot where it was just like he was out, and I just went. My wife's like, you have to go to bed. I was like, I am almost done. Like I finished in one sitting. It was really awesome. Yeah, it felt great. I'm trying not to give anything away, but I absolutely just loved all your characters. I thought they were all very unique, but also felt, really good within the genre. Um, uh, can't talk about that because that's a giveaway. Yeah, but I thought that everybody that you had in the book itself, from start to finish, just made like a perfect appearance, and it really kept the story going. And when when you had different characters pop up, it just felt like a lot of good impetus to the end. And then by the time I finished, I was like, oh, this book is done. I was like, I need another one. So I thought that was really cool from a writer standpoint. I was really impressed with that. So I thought you did that like super, super well. I'll talk about that more. in my review episode for it. But yeah, I thought that was really, really excellently done. So I've been trying to take some writer notes from from you on there for the novella, because I kept thinking of yours and someone else's that I read recently, and I was like, oh, I wanted to feel, like you could read in one sitting, and still be interesting from beginning, middle, and end. But yeah, it went really quick, too quick. I think I went through a little too fast. I should have savored it a little bit more. But yeah, it was really awesome. So I was just curious, when you were, kind of plotting out the story itself, particularly for a novella, how did you get so much in there, but also make kind of the story just feel like it flowed really easily? I was just curious if you had a couple of checkpoints or just like events that you were kind of going through. Like, I was just kind of curious how you went through with your plotting that way.
The plotting. It's like
It's hard to not give it away, right?
so like in regards to like Sister Samurai, it definitely was one of those things that kind of came to me all at once, like a TV episode that played through my head. So
Hmm,
I had actually a very clear idea what the story would be.
cool.
I even already had like certain songs that are on the playlist. I knew exactly like where I wanted that to hit. Like the ramen shop scene, I knew exactly what that beat would look like. Like some
Oh,
other
that's cool.
exactly what that beat would look like. Um, and I think just in regards to like this particularly, I just had a very good view of like what everything was gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Well, maybe that's it, right? Maybe you just had such a clear view of it. I don't know. I just felt like it really hit. I just felt like it started, and then I'm trying to figure out a good way to put it without giving anything away. Yeah, like just the different events that you set up, I felt like, really just set you on her journey. Maybe is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And then it really just kind of kept going from there. I did really like the little snippets of her past. I thought that you just did a great job building such a big world in something really tiny. So if any authors are trying to figure out how to do that, read this book and you'll get some good notes there. Yeah, but
No,
I gotta say it was really good.
oh, thank you. And I just want to point out, a lot of like I think those techniques is inspired by again anime that I grew up with. For example, particularly Cowboy Bebop. 'Cause,
Oh,
Cowboy Bebop, the characters are presented to you, but you actually don't know a lot of the past. You don't know a lot of their history.
yeah,
But by the end of it, you have very clear idea who these people are, like and
yeah,
like who their characters are. So I think like sometimes those little story things kind of like melt into
yeah,
the things that you watch growing up.
yeah, yeah. Now that's another one I got to go back and watch. I totally forgot about that. That's a good one. That was one I really enjoyed, when it first came out in particular. So yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the same for Samurai Champloo. You don't like, for example, Fu, she's looking for the sunflower samurai, and while that is part of the plot, when you look at Mugen and you look at Jin, you only get like kind of flashes to their backstory. You don't get
Hmm.
like everything that's happened in their entire
Yeah,
life.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And so, yeah, I was really inspired by kind of having that sense in regards to the world building and the backstory, how have enough to where the character and like this character feels real, but I want like there to feel a little bit hidden as well because you never know everything about a person that you meet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
totally.
so I love that like there could be more to the story, that
No,
feeling.
totally. Yeah. I always think of like Robert E. Howard with like Solomon Kane, Conan, Krull, like any of them that he wrote, which is interesting because he didn't do anything chronologically. Like all the adventures are like could be at any different point. And um I just thought that was interesting. I had read a writer that had looked at his it was like kind of looking at his biography and dissecting it. But it was interesting from a writer standpoint because it made a good point, what you just said too. Like, you don't like I don't know everything about you, right? Even if we've known each other for 3 years, like, it could be. I was just watching Abbott Elementary, and the main character, she's like, we're just work friends, and then all of a sudden they start telling each other things. She goes, how did I know that you had a boyfriend, Jacob, for like 2 years? And it's like they've pretty much known each other almost that entire time. So, but it's like that happens all the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that what you're saying makes total sense, and that's how I've kind of tried to divide things up a little bit, as an author. And that's like I have a D&D party like campaign we did, and I'm writing a dark fantasy. I'm trying to think of things like that though, like, well, these two guys have only been together for like, maybe a season or two, so like what do they really know? And there'll be stupid things that'll pop up that they're like, oh, I thought I told you that, like, no. And
Yeah,
and
I
just
love that.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, just, but that's real life, right? And I think that makes things a lot more fun. So yeah, I think that makes total sense. But sorry, I just have Cowboy Bebop stuck in my head now, so I'm gonna have to write that down and go back. I did that after a couple other ones that you and I talked about, and I got some good writing stuff, because that's like, you watch. I just want to point you right. You watch things as a kid, right? Afro Samurai. I watched Samurai Jack and stuff like that
Yeah.
a lot recently as character studies. There were other TV shows and stuff, where I just think it's like Mr. Miyagi is like my favorite character ever. So I'll go back and character study him. So I just want to point out to people, I've been talking about this a little bit privately with people, but I think it's good to go back to the things you really enjoyed, like you and I talked about, right, from our first interview, and figure out why you really enjoyed them, right, from a
Yeah.
writer standpoint. I think there's just a lot to pull there. So,
And it's great. Like, I remember when I first watched Samurai Champloo, and I thought it was good. Like, I thought it was okay, but it didn't like blow my mind. But I watched it again after I had taken Japanese, after I, like
mm,
did university Japanese history studies, and then I went back and I was like, this is brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
Oh wow, wait a minute. This author is using hip hop as a way to comment on the social situation in Japan. And I was just like, this is what?
yeah, yeah,
Sometimes going back and watching things a second time, it's just like, whoa, I
yeah,
missed this before.
yeah. Well, that's why I got to say I enjoy talking to authors like yourself before I read your books now, because there's just so, like, I think that's why I enjoyed Sister Samurai so much, because there were things I knew you were trying to do, and I felt like you did them really well. So it just, not that the book itself wasn't fabulous and nobody would be able to enjoy it, but I just felt like I enjoyed the author's cut a lot more. And I've done that with so many books recently. And it's just so cool to see what authors like yourself and creators are trying to do in the process, and then to kind of hit those checkpoints. Or it's cool for me to fill in the gaps. Like for instance, like I just thought, like, I don't know. Like I totally get how, like she's feeling at times, right? Like being the only one. Like that was just such a theme. And I read it at a time where I started my new job. And, I used to have a co-teacher, and him and I are like brothers. And now I don't see him every day, and it was new, and I felt very outside for a while, so, and I don't know, it made me feel like I remembered that person, and and everything else. And I don't know, I really felt that, and I was really connected on that level with understanding that type of feeling. So I don't know, I think that you have a lot of themes in there like that you know people could really connect with. But again, I think that's where, like, I think Afro Samurai did a really good job of that too. And I just think anime from that time period did, right, like had just so many good themes. And
Yeah.
that's why people, right, yeah, that's why I want live actions of them or whatever, to refeel some of those kind of things. So I think I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I don't know, there was just so many times where she was reminiscing or something like that. And I don't know, I found myself doing the same thing. I really felt that. And yeah, I felt at times like I was the last of, my clan or whatever. And,
And it's
had
nice.
to deal.
And it's nice to have the opportunity to write an older character who has so much history behind her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Writing YA is kind of like, oh, all they know is all they know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a good point too, because I did like that, as I forgot about that. I did like that aspect as well. You and several other authors I've read recently, have taken a character that's not, young Luke Skywalker or whoever you want to say on the farm, or the young adult, but has taken somebody with some more miles on him. That's why I love Lethal Weapon so much with Danny Glover, like he's like at the end of his career, Mel Gibson's at the start, and that's why the in between is so funny. And I have that going for two characters in a short story, like, or novella series, because I've always loved that. So I did like that. I liked how she was kind of, bones were creaking and stuff. I was definitely feeling that as well. So I could definitely relate to that. But I just thought it was cool that, yeah, you picked, not the new Sistah Samurai, but there was somebody who had a little bit more miles on them, and I thought that it really. I know you had mentioned that originally too at some point when we talked. I can't remember if it was in the interview or we talked after, but I thought that that added a lot to the story. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, thank you.
There was other things you added too that I don't want to spoil that I thought were cool that made the person a little bit later in life, that made it really cool too. That brought out a lot of things that myself have had to deal with, a lot of feelings and things, and themes that like I understand now that I'm a little bit older. You understand when you guys go read the book, if you know me at all from these podcasts. But yeah, I thought that all those things were just done really well. Yeah, I was really feeling. I just felt the whole thing. It's like there's so many things that were popping off with the themes, but it was one of the better themed books I would have to say that I've read recently. So, and it was cool because, like you said right earlier, you're like, oh, some people say it's just a novella, but I'm like, I felt a lot during that novella, so and I connected a lot with it. So I definitely thought it was, definitely one of the better novellas I've read within the last 5 years. I'm a novella fiend. I go through them like candy. I love them. um, so we talked a little bit, about like how you came up with some of these different ideas. But I'm just curious, like how you developed the idea for your magic system within this universe, because that was just something I was not expecting. It was just so cool.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned that.
Yeah.
So the magic system is where like someone creates talismans using kanji that's made out of magical ink. So through these talismans, they can have different magical effects depending on the kanji that's used. And kind of studying Japanese language, studying Japanese, I always wanted to do a kanji-based system. And kanji is one of 3 Japanese alphabets. The other is hiragana and katakana. And kanji is the more symbolic one that descended from kind of like Chinese characters. But I also always want to do kind of like a soul magic system. And so this was kind of like a fun way to create and combine both those ideas. And I don't know, it was definitely inspired by my I don't know if I want to say like love of Japanese language because I definitely struggled learning it. So this was I don't know, this was a way to turn my struggle into a triumph. Like, look,
Yeah, yeah.
Japanese professor, my sensei, I did something with it. But and also in addition to that, I did really want more cinematic fight scenes. So I did want to add kind of like this magical visual element to it to kind of have this fight scenes be a little bit more cinematic. And also the character running out of ink is kind of important to the plot. And I wanted the readers to have a way to visually see that. So for example, in Japan, like traditionally the ink, sumi ink is solid. So they have a solid ink. But specifically, I created this new type of liquid ink, that's kind of created from a person's blood, sweat, and tears. And so that the reader can visually follow along in the narrative. So they could see like, oh, this is running out. What
Yeah.
happened when it runs out? Kind of like build that tension. So yeah, like I love magic systems, especially in anime, but like I love magic systems that looks deceptively easy but isn't. So I just all those kind of different things I kind of put together. I was like, yeah.
Man, talk about tense. I was so tense. I was like, oh no. Like I was like, what's
Yeah.
gonna happen?
But yeah, so that was intentional, built into the magic system.
I can't remember if you had said that with Herman or if I had seen you talk about that somewhere else, but I was just like, God, that was really cool from like a writer, just like a reader standpoint, it was awesome. But from a writer standpoint, I was just like, people ask me, how do you build tension? How do you, do these things? I had like Brandon Sanderson talked about somebody he read took Dante's Inferno, but then updated it, but like you could track it with the map in the book. They're going in the circles. So that's how you could track the story, right? So I thought that was so cool that you were able to do that in such a unique way, but still build so much tension because it really does. Like I felt like you like had me by the throat at one point, and I'm just like, that was the only moment I just like I had to pause and I was like went to get some water and a snack. I think it'll be okay, but I'm not sure because Tatiana loves anime and not all anime is everything okay.
I
So
mean, that's true. That's true. And one thing that anime does really well is it you tend to learn like a different aspect or a different thing with each fight scene. So I wanted to do that too. So each fight scene, you learn a little bit different, more about the magic system. So it's not just action. There's also information in each
Yeah,
as well.
sorry, I'm like processing that now that you say that, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, that was really neat. I'm gonna have to go back and reread it now just to go and go back over some of these things that we talked about today. But yeah, it was super cool. I felt like you gave me like really good information each time. But that was one thing that kept me going. Now that you mention it, that was one thing that kept me going from scene to scene so quickly because I think it was like the second time when you did that. I was like, oh, cool. So this seems to be like an ongoing thing. And I wanted to figure out. It was just such a cool magic system. I wanted to figure out how it worked, and then. But I thought you did a good job too of not using the same trick twice, if that makes sense. Like I felt like there was a lot of different things that you were able, to do with the magic system, or that she was able to do. So I just thought it was so cool to see each new thing. Like it really, but that's again, I felt like it made the story flow
Yeah.
really easily.
Yeah, that
So
was also one thing I gave to myself, never to do like especially an action scene in the same type of environment, like always
yeah,
the environment.
there, I was gonna say I don't want to say, but there was one that I just liked so much, and I actually this is why I think it's important to read. This is also why I do podcasts. It's why I listen to people's podcasts, because there was one scene where I was like, oh my god, this is so cool, where they're fighting and like what's going on, and then you added all these elements that right as a martial artist I had to take into account and consider, and it really made me like rewrite several fight scenes that I was writing myself, just to make them just no, well, yeah, I would say exciting, but also just to, I don't know, just like fun as a writer, but also as a reader to read. Because I just thought it was so fun for me to read it. And I was thinking about if I had to be in that situation like her, like what would I do? So yeah, it was really cool. I don't want to say which one, but I like that it was each of them were different. And that she had to employ different strategies or tactics, particularly as you were saying, as the ink was dwindling. But it was really cool that way. I thought it was done really well. And I almost keep saying the part that I liked, but the fight scene. But I don't want to give it away because I was
okay. You can tell me after.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, it was really good though. So highly recommend it, guys. Yeah, but it was cool as a writer because I was just like was kind of tracking some of the things you were doing. So I would like finish a part, like a section, and then I kind of mulled over it, and then kind of thought, just as a reader, but then I thought as a writer, and I was like, there were just so many cool things I felt like you did. But yeah, I really liked those things that you just said. Like, I like that, we can track the story with the ink. But I liked because you like because there were also the different levels, right, of the fights, or like what she had to do
Yeah.
to get past or to get to certain points. I felt like were interesting too. So I like that too. I know a lot of video games I played, where it's like there's different strategies you have to employ. I felt like couldn't do the same thing twice. So I thought that was really cool too. Zoom does not like me today. Oh, you got there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Oh, perfect. I was just saying, like, like I just thought it was cool because there was a video game somebody was mentioning to me. They're like, oh, there's like different things you have to do to get by. Like
Oh,
this
can you
one
hear
might be
me?
really hard. Yeah, can you hear
Oh
me now?
no. Okay, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Can you hear me now? One. Sorry about that. I was just saying, I just thought it was cool with the different fight scenes where your strategy was different, but I felt like the difficulty level at different times, based off of was I felt like you just did so many different things that each battle felt real in itself, if that makes sense, with the difficulty and what they were doing. So everything was really unique, I thought, about each one, and made it really fun to read. So flew through it.
Yeah.
Because some people, they like, it's like a video game, right? Every level is like almost the same, or and it's just like, oh my goodness, it just gets kind of boring. So I felt like yours was the opposite. So it was just really cool to get to see. I wanted to get to the next part to see what you had written next. So I thought it flowed really well.
That's awesome. Afro
Yeah,
Samurai was a video game.
that's true. It's true. I just wanted to mention too, where it was just such a cool magic system. Like I had for season 2, I think it was quite a few episodes before you and I talked to, where I had interviewed Anne St. Lin, and she
Ah,
wrote Rebel Eyes.
yeah, I
And
watched that interview because I was like, huh, that kind of sounds like my magic system. But at the
oh
time, I was like, well, let me go see it just to make sure it's different.
yeah, so cool, where she did the origami, and then
Yeah,
like
that's so cool.
there was just so many things you guys did so similar that was also different. It just was like, it just goes to show you how, I want to one time take, like, you and me, right? Take an idea and write a short story. Same characters, like 5 characters, right? Same concept. And then we each write a story, like a short story. And I bet you, this would be one of my seminars, right? I bet you if we came together and read them and then dissected them, they'd be totally different, and you could even give the same type of magic system, but we would employ them in different ways. So I think that just goes to show, right? Like, it's just so cool what you're able to do. So there were like so many things that were similar, but there were so many differences that you two had. And it was just so cool to see not your typical magic systems, to see,
Yeah.
that extenuation. So it was really neat.
I feel like a lot of writers sometimes like get concerned about that. They might see like an idea that's similar to theirs and like, oh
Yep.
no, like I can't do this anymore. And it's like, well, trust me, it'll be different because you're different. You're a different person. You're
Yeah.
writing it. I mean, please let there be more Black lady samurais. I welcome it. But are
I
they be like
yeah,
mine? I don't know.
I will buy them. Tatiana only writes so much so quickly. But I think that's where people forget, right? Like, I mean, yeah, and that's where, like, I've always loved Red Sonia. I went, and there was one of the guys I met, actually in person, did some really cool stuff. I'm totally blanking on his name. But it was a South American fantasy.
Oh,
My
cool.
friend got me. Yeah, remind me. I'll send it to you. And it's spelled really interesting. I know it probably means something, but I just can't remember right now. But it was so cool. I got the first issue. A friend got it for me when I was sick last year. I got to go back and talk to the creator and artist, and I was like, this changed my life as a reader and an author. Like, as a writer, I was like, this was amazing. I think it's called Metzel. It's like Metz, I think, but it was so good. But I said, I was said to a friend, and he was like, I've never heard of like a South American fantasy, but I'm like, I feel like we don't hear enough of them. So yeah, so when you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, you write me all the samurai women that you can, of any whatever. I'm like, I'll read it. Like, it was so cool. And I liked where you, with like there were certain things too, where you had other characters from flashbacks, and different things. And I just felt like it was such a cool warrior culture, if that makes sense. Yeah, but it was really neat. That's where me and Herman were like, we want to know more about them, like, just in general. But I thought that was really cool. It very much reminded me of like Kelly McCall. I loved he had some just strong female protagonists from Arl, like the main character's days and stuff, in his like assassin guild. And it was just so cool to feel those same vibes, because his series is done, and Sistah Samurai gave me like the same type of vibes. So it was really cool, particularly with their culture in general, with like their organization. So that was really cool. So
Awesome.
yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, I'll read any Afro Samurai women you guys want to throw at me. Take my money, as my friend likes to say. Uh, oh, and this is another question. You don't have to answer if you're not sure, but I'm over here being like, please, please, please. How many novellas or books possibly do you plan for your Sistah Samurai universe?
Yeah, so I'm very comfortable answering because I've already announced this on my social media. So
Oh, perfect. I bet I must have been busy the last couple of weeks. Go figure.
So I'm planning 3 more novellas in this world because if you've read the first of the Samurai, it's very spring inspired, and I thought I would love to have a novella for each season. So the
That's
next
so
one will be
cool.
summer, fall, and winter, and so that will like match the covers. So the covers will be like a different pop of color each each
Gonna
one.
make me buy them all. That's fine. That's fine.
So yeah, so like a book for each season. So I'm already like beginning to I definitely kind of know what the second one is going to be about.
Oh, that's so cool. What a cool idea too. Like that's awesome. That's like HM Long, like hers are just a little bit different with the color schemes, but they're so cool. And then I just have to buy the fourth one actually. That actually I think just came out. And they just look so cool next to each other. But it's just interesting to kind of see. She went and did like a couple different themes, like thematically, but it was really cool to see those themes pop out, not just physically, but like in the books themselves. So I think that's really neat. But yeah, I love the springtime theme though, because or just like with like the really just like just with the flowers and things you did, because it just very was reminiscent of like the last samurai. Oh my god, I'm totally blanking on the actor's name. Could
Oh,
tell it's like after it was the guy that played Katsumoto, the
oh,
Japanese.
okay.
I'm totally blanking. Like everybody always talks about Tom Cruise. I'm like, Tom Cruise was okay. No offense to him, but the actor that played Katsumoto, he was also in like a bunch of other movies that I absolutely loved, and he's one of my favorites. I've written like 4 characters for him. If he ever wants to play in a movie for me, but I love where he at the end like talks about like just like that samurai concept, right? About just like how the petals are perfect and seeing the perfect flowers and day or something like that. I don't know. I just felt like philosophically it was really cool, but it had that same type of writer feel to it. Because
Yeah,
after I saw the movie and that scene, I was like, oh, I get it. And I felt like harmonized. So I felt like you were able to do the same thing,
yeah.
particularly with the ending. So it was super cool.
Yeah, it was intentional because like, I also grew up on samurai movies like your
Mm.
Jimbo, Seven Samurai, like Lone Wolf and Cub and like
Oh my God.
those tropes in where it was a lot of fun.
I want I Lone Wolf and Cub, like I can't wait for my son to be old enough to like enjoy those. And like I think like the first half. I got them really cheap somewhere and I was like, these are so cool. So yeah, those are really cool. But yeah, I'm really anxious to see what you do with winter though. Like that'll be cool. I'm actually anxious to see what you do with
I
all
already have
books.
the title. I already have the title.
I love surprises. My wife, she hates surprises. I love surprises. So I told her, I was like, I love surprises. And one of the kids asked me, one of my students, I was like, yeah, like when I saw your cover, just like on my feed, I like flipped out. Something else happened like that to me recently too. I was like, I love surprises. It makes the day go by quicker and better. So but yeah, that makes me really good to know. I remember I think I saw somewhere where you were talking about the 4 seasons. So I'm so glad, to hear that you're still, think about going with that, because that just to me just sounds really cool. I can't wait to see all the covers like next to each other and with their variants. That'll be really sweet.
Yeah, I mean, like I do blame it on music because the music inspires me a lot. So, like the end credit song to the seasons, and it's like,
Mm,
yeah, it's playing in my head after I finish them.
that's awesome. That's super cool. The things we writers get joy out of, I tell you. That's really neat. Um, so when it came to the world building, I was just curious, like, what were the most important elements that it had to contain for this novella to match your story? And we had talked, about, like sometimes there's things you want to bring in, right? But I was just curious at like what you were trying to put in versus, like from Afro Samurai and these other influences. But I was curious at like, how you would kind of distinguish, what was going to go in, and then maybe some things maybe that you had to leave out for this particular novella.
Yeah. So, I do think world building is very difficult for a novella because you can't put it all in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes the balance of putting enough world building where the world feels fleshed out, but not putting so much that bogs down the story, kind of finding that balance can be hard. And I do think it helps the story that it's in first person. So, which means that the world building that I can show is limited to like what the character knows.
Yeah.
So, if she doesn't know everything, I can't, I can't explain it. Um, but there were definitely a few key things that I wanted to kind of come across in the story. And I definitely wanted kind of just to show like the breadth of characters and personalities that existed in this world and that, kind of are reminiscent of different personalities I've grown up with in the Black diaspora. And I also wanted to show kind of that fusion of Japanese and Black culture, like inspired world. I definitely wanted to feel like a fusion of both of them. There are some things that I cut. I think what was really helpful was having beta readers, and I had some beta readers that were familiar with Afro Samurai and the animes, and some beta readers that weren't. So sometimes like I had a few key things of a few like extra Easter eggs and a few extra jokes, but if they stood out too much to the readers that did not know or did not understand, I went ahead and took those out. I wanted to make sure for those who didn't know, it still stood on its own as a story. But for those who did know, like there are still a lot of fun things in there to have fun with.
Oh, that's cool. That's super cool. I think it again. I just talked to a friend privately yesterday about this. I think it's why beta readers are so important.
Yeah.
Somebody in my group, heard my podcast group, they're like on Facebook, they're like, "You guys use beta readers?" It was like a meme, and I'm like, "Yeah, like please do it." Like,
Yeah, like graders are so important. And honestly, they also helped me to kind of shift the book a bit because when I wrote the book, the audience for the book were Afro Samurai fans. Like that is who the audience of the book was. But when I put the call out for beta readers, I was shocked by the number of beta readers that signed up that hadn't read Afro Samurai. They just wanted to read it. It
interesting.
was a Black lady samurai. And I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, okay. So that means I'm going to have a double audience with this book. People who haven't seen it and people who haven't. And I need to make sure it works on both accounts, works on
yeah.
both accounts. So, like for example, the first draft, there's a lot more Japanese words. Like I have a much bigger Japanese vocabulary, but there's a lot of things that I detranslated, like yokai into demon, like fure into brush. Like I detranslated a lot of things so that um it was more accessible to a wider audience who was looking for just they wanted to see a Black lady samurai kicking ass. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
have the story still make sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. You're saying that like you're speaking my tune because like I just sent my alpha readers and developmental editor my novella, and I said I was like I took out certain scenes already, thinking that and that, McCory changed my cover too because the first one looked too military thriller, but I was trying to blend, I was trying to get people that enjoyed like a character who was in the military and then explain his transition to like a monster hunter. So I feel you there because it's so hard to think that I put too many supernatural things in and not, and it's a prequel. So I just feel that struggle because I'm like, I can't wait to see what they have to say because I have scenes like ready to go, right? To put back in or to take out based off of, what they and beta readers have to say. So um, but I think that's where where you're saying right, the beta readers are so important. So I definitely would recommend people using them. We said before we got recording too, right, that you need to pick a your team, well, and I think beta readers, right, and you said you had a good proofreader too. I think that really comes down to it. It's kind of hard for indie people at first,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny because I actually had the duology is a little bit different than Sistah Samurai, especially in
Yeah,
regards to voice. Because
yeah,
a lot of it
totally.
is written in like AAVE, is written more closely to how I talk and how the people around me speak. So when I was looking for a proofreader and a copy editor specifically for this book, the copy editor I went is, like was someone in my community and it was someone who recognizes AAV and wasn't like, let me cross everything out.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, don't waste your time.
yeah,
Understand.
yeah, yeah.
So sometimes even on different projects, you might need different people.
I would agree. I have this just like absolutely amazing young princess who I don't want to give things away, but like has to figure out essentially how to be a warrior. And not that it's her fault, but like people didn't prep her right. And there's just so many things that they shelter her from. And she's from what I called like the Wilds, and it's like this kingdom that's kind of like in like a very interesting geographical spot in my fantasy world. And I've been actually kind of going back and forth at like what type of culture I want, like her to represent in their country. And like kind of what time period in history too, to like bring things out. So I've been kind of like playing back and forth, but my friend just did this amazing art piece for her. And I was like, I think we're gonna have to go with like kind of like African, and she's just blowing up my mind. But I'm like, I said to my friend, I said, there's just certain characters. I said, you just need certain people to either help you, or even like my main character, Nathaniel, like he's a Marine, right? I'm not a Marine. I know martial arts, but I don't know what they do. So I'm trying to find a Marine to help me, right? Because those might be some of the people I'm trying to draw into the book. And I have this character. She's just so amazing, and she's going to be one of the most powerful characters in my universe. But I got to make sure I do, I get her right, and the type of just like thought process, even, right? Like I'm a 36-year-old man. Like I have no idea, what like 17, 18-year-old, girls are thinking. I usually don't even know what my son's thinking, or my brother, he's a little younger than me. So I just feel like, yeah, it's really important to get people to help you. But I like how you mentioned that, because I've talked to different people about different projects. And particularly, I think if you're like my fantasy world, I have a lot of different cultures that I try to represent and shed light to, because I think they're really cool and really interesting. But I think it's really important, to do them justice. So I think it's really important to find the right people to help you. I think particularly for beta readers, personally, I've seen quite a few people say that within a couple of the sci-fi books I've seen recently. Yeah, so I think it's important to find not just beta readers, but the right beta readers or the right team to help you. But like you said, right, it could be different based off the book or the character or the project. So I think a lot of people I've talked to recently, we've talked about that. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's come up for me like over and over again. So you each have different, because you might have something within sci-fi, right, or sci-fi fantasy, like you mentioned, Rob, where you're like, oh, I want to talk to somebody that knows this or does this, and then like you go into that category, and those people in sci-fi are like I said the wrong thing, and for one of my Marines, and my friend who's alpha reading, he's like, you say that and like military people are going to stop reading your book. Because I was originally writing the character in Afghanistan, and I had Taliban still in there. And then he's like, no, if you're talking about Baghdad, which is where I reset it, because I was missing some mythological factors. So I had to go back, and I forgot that, but that's what alpha and beta readers are for. So I think you're right, where it could be, a different team based off of, the book or the project. So I think that's really, really solid advice. But
yeah, speaking of science fiction, I did write a short story one time, and it was turned down because they were like, that's not how a spaceship works, Tatiana. I was like, oh, next time I'll go consult a spaceship engineer.
It's so funny you said that, because like I had some different systems, and there was somebody that said that they're like, you need to talk to an engineer. They're like, and then I learned a lot about cooling systems and things. So yeah, I kind of backburned my sci-fi book, because it's like a mech marine thing, and I thought that was funny, because I was like, this is like science fiction, but the science is still there, right? So yeah, it's funny you say that. I totally feel you there. So I got to get back to that at some point. But that's again, I got to find somebody that can help me, or
Yeah.
or help our beta read. That kind of makes sense. That's really funny. If anybody knows any, space aero engineers, me and Tatiana need the help. So all right. So I'm trying to ask the seventh question in a way that doesn't give anything away for your novella. But if you had to go into a fight with one of your characters, could be a friendly book too, which character would have your back? Who would it be, and why?
So definitely Sistah Samurai, the main character, but only if she has her glasses on.
Oh, that's fair.
Let me tell you, there has not been a fight in the book with her glasses on, and I do have to say, it makes a difference. But yeah, she's such an interesting character, because I feel like there's a lot of dichotomies to her character. So sometimes what she says and what she does, and sometimes what she does isn't necessarily what she says. Like one minute she's like, this is not my business, I'm just visiting this village. But the next chapter, she could be like, this is my village, it's under my protection. So now get out. So she'll help me begrudgingly, but I think she'll help me.
Or maybe gripe about it, you know.
Yeah, I'll definitely hear about it the whole time.
That's awesome. I had a friend, that's where I got this question from. I had a friend that used to write himself into different character scenes with his characters, just as like a writing exercise to start his writing session. And then eventually he changed himself into a character and wrote himself as a character into the book. But he wrote himself as if he was a bumbling idiot with fighting, and that the character, right? So he was like a merchant or something, you know, like one of those quests that you have to go on or whatever, you know, where you have to, you know, usher me around. I don't know how to fight, essentially. So it was like absolutely hysterical. But yeah, that maybe you got to write that scene now. I would definitely read that. Love to see how you guys do, you know, against like the demons and stuff. But really cool. I was hoping you'd pick her, but you never know. It's like picking your favorite child. Some people are like, "Oh, I don't know who my favorite child is." Other people are like, "Yeah, it's this one," and they pick it right away. So
Yeah, I mean, the other ones have not been introduced yet, so.
that's fair. That's fair. Um, yeah, no, that's fair. I was like trying to figure out how to word that one without giving anything away. So I'm glad you went that route. Yeah, but definitely a lot of other cool characters in there as well. She was definitely my favorite, but I liked how I felt like each character was really unique and brought different things to the table. So I thought that was really cool. And then we'll go with that last one. I just want to make sure you have enough time, you know, to let us know what you have going on. Do you have any news updates or current projects like that you can share with us?
Sure. So I just started selling signed copies of Sistah Samurai on my
Oh,
website, so they are available. I just got a shipment of hardcovers in, so they should be
oh, cool.
soon. And I'm also currently finished with the first draft of my new novel, so I'm very
Oh, cool.
excited about that. Like
Congrats. That's awesome.
yeah, it's done. I know where things are going. Um, as I mentioned before, it's set in the same world as my duology, but the intention is for people to be able to pick it up without having read it. Like
Oh,
it's a brand new adventure. Kind of very, as we talked about the
yeah,
Conan
yeah.
ones, you can just pick it up and it should make sense. That is
That's awesome. One.
Yeah, so as we mentioned before in regards to Conan, it's kind of very similar to where it's different like serial adventures that you should be able to pick up without, like pretty
Cool.
easy without having to read the other ones. But I think and we'll have like exchange of characters. So if you want to learn kind of like serial
Oh, that's
novels
cool.
done very much, at least in the done very much yet. We'll see how it goes. Writing the Sister Samurai novellas. So I plan on just popping them out. I'm gonna do them. Just
That's awesome.
because technically, yeah. So after I finish working on this novel, I'm gonna go work on the Sister Samurai novellas. There's only 3 of them, so I'm gonna pop them out because technically novellas, they're still shorter than a whole novel. So I plan to work on that novel and these 3 novellas. Those are my projects for the year.
Well, that sounds awesome. I look forward to all of those, particularly the Sister Samurai ones. One of my favorite characters now in Worlds. So I look forward to see what you do with that. Just want to remind people to take a look at Tatiana's social links or book links. Book links are right there. And Sister Samurai will be there. And then I'm also going to put Tatiana's original interview with us and her interview with Herman Sternagel over at the Greatest Podcast in Multiverse. It was awesome. Please make sure you're going to, anything you read or, review for her, just make sure you are, reviewing those products. Those are going to be so vital to everybody. It also helps people like Felix as well, who did the Sister Samurai cover, and helps, those other people and editors and those kind of people too. So we are a community. So anything we can do to help help each other out would be great. And of course, helps out Tatiana, and I get to read more Sistah Samurai books. So I'm really excited about that. So, Tatiana, thank you so much for coming on again. It was really cool to have you on and to get to talk about this, for the second time. And, I look forward to seeing how far, the rest of the novellas go in this universe for you. So.
I do too. So we'll see how they go. But
I
I'm
hope
glad
everybody
to be here. Thank you for
I
inviting
hope
me.
everybody buys them, and I hope that we're going to talk about this in season 10 with like Sister Samurai, like 12 or 1200, whatever people can help us, help us out with. So, but good luck on your writing. If there's anything else I can do in the meantime, please just let me know. But other than that, I'll be emailing you, after this interview, and I look forward to talking on social media, my friend.
Yep. Bye,
See you
Daniel.
later. Bye.